with this issue of Finance Bill 2024. Hey, a lot of talk, gentlemen. A lot of talk. From bread all the way to cars and whatnot, and carry accessing your data. In regards to data protection, where does it stand? We have a lot to address here. And I think even as we dissect this Finance Bill 2024, there are this broad classification in regards to changes in the bill. So there is the issue of income tax. There is the issue of value-added tax. There is also the issue of excise, which is very important. And then we can talk about the rest, tax procedures, regards to how the taxman ought to carry, what changes they're making to make their work easy, and any other changes that do come. But for starters, punching from a very broad perspective, I want to give you, Dr. Luenyi, a challenge, Talk to me about going through this particular document. What were the positives that you were able to make out of it that really stood out for you? Mention two for us before we move deeper into this discussion.
One of the things is transfer pricing, which is actually positive in a way that it will enable us to, it will enable us to get more out of it. We have been getting less. And also the issue of VAT, the expansion of the same, so that we now talk of the VAT registration at more, it was increased by, I think, 3M or so. And then also the issue of, for SMEs, there is the gain in terms of we are able now to be able to import things like onions, which are our trouble, and other products from around the region, with the excise. So I think those are some of the areas. But of course, there is the other part which you don't want to ask me for now.
I knew you were waiting. Talk to me about, the negatives from this bill. That's why I started with the positives. We start on a positive note. We're going to come to that. Ken, I know Dr. has mentioned quite, is passionate about onions, but a lot of Kenyans seem to be crying about this issue, just correlating with the onion issue. Talk to me from your perspective, apart from what is mentioned. What do you think are some of the positives from a macro, broader perspective on this Finance Bill 2024?
Many thanks. No, I think the couple that Prof has given are quite good examples. Maybe I can just add the word on pension relief. I think they've also increased the threshold in terms of reduction of taxation. I would say probably that's the third one to just add on top of what Prof has already said.
All right. Pension relief. Yes. Of course, there's that discussion of how many people actually engage pension services in this economy, where there is that element of huge informality, and we normally say that quote in quote. But we've seen also the pension sector trying to go out there, diversify, reach out, create products that are very, very easy for, as they call it, mama mboga, to be able even to uptake pension services. But let's start with this issue of VAT, because that's where there's a lot of sensitivity, For starters, something that you mentioned, Prof, a threshold for mandatory VAT registration. It seems to be one of the positives that's coming out of this proposition, now effective 1st July 2024. The bill proposes to increase threshold for mandatory VAT registration from 5 million shillings to 8 million shillings. And essentially, this means that any person making or expecting to make taxable supplies worth 8 million shillings in any period within 12 months will be required to be registered under the VAT Act. This movement from 5 to 8 million shillings, what is the implication of that, especially for businesses in Kenya, Prof?
That gives us space because you see the moment that you are to register with VAT, then the tax will actually be higher. So the fact that it's increased from 5 to 8, that means there are still some other businesses that are able to grow, expand without the fear of registration of the same. And again, also, it means that they will be spending less because some of the businesses are actually spending on accountants to help them to do that. So they will actually be able to spend less. And that also gives them space for growth in terms of employing more people. Because now the business has to grow up to 8 million. So there will still be space for expansion, yeah.
Ken, this issue of tax compliance burden, especially when you see the figures being moved up, it seems to be a huge relief for majority of businesses. As we say in the Kenyan context, majority of our businesses fall under the MSME category. Talk to me about how this will ease in that. That is one. And this compliance, is it one of the challenges that MSMEs is dealing with it heavily? And from the government perspective also, is it, are they seeing this as an untapped area that we kind of have to sort of widen the net and majority of these businesses fall under this 8 or 5 million threshold?
Indeed, the MSME sector is a place of huge potential. That's where a lot of job creation is happening. That's why there's a lot of growth and activity, the entire private sector. The only challenge there is sometimes businesses don't have the sophistication. Maybe they don't have the access to the accountants that Prof has said. They don't have the access to the accounting tools that would help them organize themselves. So if in those spaces, there is huge potential, huge cash flow moving around, but very little sophistication. And from that perspective, they would find it very difficult to comply with what the government would want. So I think the fact that the government is giving them that leeway, that space to continue building those businesses, and the expectation is by the time you have a turnover of 8 million in a year, you should have sufficient structures, you should have quality accountants, and at that level now you should have really no excuse of not being able to meet the obligation. So I think it was a really good relief, and at least now business owners can really focus on building their businesses.
Definitely, very, very important. Under the VAT also, it touches on the Kenyan breakfast. And this is one of those issues where, effective 1st July 2024, the bill has proposed actually to subject the supply of ordinary bread to VAT at the standard rate. Now, currently, the supply of ordinary bread is 0 rated for VAT. And this one is eliciting quite reaction. We saw recently, is it the chair of the budgetary committee, if I'm not wrong? Yes, and he was talking on the media, and one of the motivations for this is maybe Treasury is thinking about safeguarding our health as a nation. And we saw the same argument with sugar in the previous finance bill. Oh, there is a lot of diabetes in this country. Let us tax this product so that we save your health. And it's almost comical, Prof. But this issue of trying to, you know, VAT ordinary bread, which might cause actually the price to pump up close to 10 shillings or so. Prof, how do you interpret this?
This, as you have heard, the public outcry is quite significant because a good population of Kenyans are actually dependent on that bread. Because you see, when you say you VAT bread that much, what is the other alternative? Maybe you tell them to eat potatoes, they eat miogo, and they eat the ndumas, but those might not be available for supply, especially for the urban and the semi-urban population, who are actually the most of the people that are affording that bread. when you increase the price by 10 shillings, that is quite substantial because it actually means that the economy, the household economy is going to have less disposable income. There will be a lot of things that are not able to, because they will actually have to, I don't know, you are actually introducing some sort of a starvation within. So a child that will take 4 slices of bread will now be told you only take 2 because life has, you tighten the belt and things like that. That will actually affect our productivity. So increasing bread by 10 shillings is quite significant because one, we don't have alternative, and 2, it makes us to tighten our belt to an extent that we reach some corner.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. It's almost also known as the starvation tax, yeah? You want to starve us, you know? Is it Marie Antoinette or how? You know, Ken, you're better at history than we are. But is it a situation of, and we're going to come to motor vehicle because the same parliamentarian said if you can't pay tax for your vehicle, then don't use it, you know, which is quite concerning. But Ken, bread, is there a genuine perspective that you can see the Treasury sat down in this proposition and say we can tax bread? Is there any, look at your, you know, at your history, your knowledge, dig deep and try. Is there justification of this move?
Well, no, there are taxes that are called the Pigouvian taxes that try to incentivize a particular behavior within a population. For example, if you think people in a particular country drive too fast, you can have a taxation to reduce the speed that people are driving in that country. So there are some taxes that are used particularly on like sugary foods, as we saw last year. The cost of treatment of some of these ailments can be quite significant. But even in those kind of situations where there's a health concern, whether it's on obesity or diabetes, you find that those taxes tend to look at all the factors that contribute to that. Not just one. So if it's diabetes, for example, it's a whole range of issues that sometimes it can be hereditary, sometimes it can be due to obesity, sometimes it can be due to diet on myriad other. So you really can't hone on just one particular aspect of it. And even then, you have to be able to articulate it. One gets the sense that they still need by government to raise revenue collection. They understand the public is quite incensed about it, and one gets the feeling that this is a way of trying to justify, well, we all know the real reason is government wants to raise more money, but the explanation needs to be a bit more palatable. The only problem with these types of taxes, such as VAT on bread or other consumption taxes, is you end up in a lose-lose outcome. The government loses because, as Prof said, people will look for cheaper breakfast items, so that the VAT that the government would have planned to collect that additional 16%, actually they will not get it. Number 2, the citizens lose because the cost of bread becomes high and people choose not to consume or to consume less. And thirdly, the producers, the bakeries that bake these items now face a weaker purchasing power. So almost everybody loses in that kind of situation. And that's why even one of the headlines today, I think it was on the Business Daily, it says government has not met its revenue targets despite all the tax measures of the Finance Bill 2023. And that's the nature of consumption taxes, particularly VAT and excise, is the government always fails to meet because people will find cheaper substitutes, whether it's VAT on fuel. People will just change their mobility patterns and say, I'll travel once a week instead of 5 times a week. So the government, in the hope of getting that extra revenue, actually ends up missing out on that revenue because people just have changed the consumption patterns. And for the citizens, they live in an economy where things become expensive. So it's almost a lose-lose for all parties. And that's why we really try to encourage having a progressive tax system.
Okay. And I don't know whether there's been argument, because the whole issue of national tax policy has been coming in very strongly to create a level of consistency in our taxation and our taxation regime, which we haven't been able to do it previously. But just looking over this finance bill and the previous one for this current financial year, 2023-2024, there's, I don't know whether there is a level of consistency or not. But I think from an overall scale of things, we'll be able to touch on that. Still under VAT, you know, I don't know whether this is still to preserve your health, Daktari, but transport of sugarcane from farms to milling factories, effective 1st July 2024, the bill actually has proposed to subject the supply of transporting services for sugarcane from farms to milling factories to VAT at the standard rate of 16% now. Now, Daktari, this personal, I don't know, do you come from the sugar belt?
Yes, I do.
You see, the government is mindful of you guys. So what do you think about this proposal?
Oh, mindful or... because no, you see, when you are when you're doing that, it's like you're discouraging the guys who are actually producing sugar, because you are going to create a response where people don't want to take sugar, and therefore we don't produce. The producers of sugar will actually suffer, because there would be automatic response to that VAT added. So I don't think it's mindful. But you see, again, another thing is that we want to encourage production, particularly of sugar, because, for example, why should we import sugar? What we have discussed many times in this forum about sugar cane and sugar industry. The fact that we increase the VAT on that means that we want to discourage the production of the same. So we should actually engage in what increases the production, and also, by and large, you know, as a farmer, you'd want where the consumption is increased.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Ken?
I would completely agree with that. Governments are in charge of production, and that's why we have gross domestic product that measures production in the country. The business of consumption is very much a personal or a household decision in which government has no real control over. And that's where household choices have to come, because somebody might be having that extra sugar because they are running a bakery. So it's very difficult, and that's why there's always a concept of what is called the nanny state. And you always want to avoid the nanny state. The nanny state is a state that tries to induce your level of consumptions. But governments should be in the businesses of really looking at production side from a macro perspective. How consumption happens, that can only be left to individuals and households. And that's why we don't have gross domestic consumption.
Yes.
It's impossible to measure that. So I think it's very important governments and government policy looks at broad production and leaves those choices on consumption to really individuals and households.
Definitely. And talking about production, when we talk about the creative sector, they do film production, all right? So let's take a look of how mindful the government was for this to this sector. Now, imports or purchase of for local film production, the current VAT treatment was exempt. The proposal is 16% VAT, yeah? I think the film industry has really grown, yeah? It's time that when it comes to, you're trying to get your camera into this space, quality camera, you know, quality equipment, lights, let's tax you as a filmmaker. Amazing. Still, in the tourism space, okay? We're talking about rebound. We're trying to reach the pre-COVID levels of tourism in the country. guess what Treasury is thinking about, yeah? Supplies for goods directly and exclusively used for the construction of tourism facilities. Current VAT treatment is exempt, but we think we've reached the pre-COVID levels. Now, if you want to construct tourism facilities, if you're importing those things, 16% VAT. Makofi, yes? Interesting stuff here. Health sector, Ken. Health, because health is wealth as a country. Supplies for goods directly and exclusively used for construction and equipping of specialized hospital facilities. Okay? Initially it was exempt, now it's at 16%. We have shift, you know. The social health insurance facility will cover us in that regard. Just, Daktari, looking at this, touching on the creative sector, film production, tourism sector, and also health sector. Now there is the argument that maybe some of these products, we are trying to, you know, have them locally sourced so that you don't import. Is there justification of this proposal to start imposing the standard VAT on these key, 3 key areas?
I think we need to think again because one, when you talk about film production, we are basically talking about the youth, the future of our youth. Old people do not really engage in creative activities like film production. So these are people who are just beginning their lives. They are starting and they are becoming creative so that they can be able to do something that will give them a means of livelihood. So I think we need to rethink so that we don't go to that extreme. Let us encourage an environment where they're able to demonstrate their creativity and by allowing the film industry to grow. Okay. Talking about the tourism, you know, one of our leading foreign exchange earner, if not one of the best, is tourism. So tourism now, when you during this time that we are just recovering from Corona, and we want to expand our tourism industry, the hotels and the rest. I think we need to rethink about that one.
Yes.
Then about the the health, we also need to look into that because the primary need is health. But as you've said, we have local. We want to encourage local production, but it's still not sufficient. You know, like the other day we were talking about where medicines are to be manufactured here, pharmaceutical. We don't have much of them. Okay. So when we discourage, then we will actually have very little, which will lead to scarcity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Definitely. Ken, I would have come to you, but we want to take a short break so that the next segment will begin with you. But one of the key takeaways is around the bread one. And Prof has just said this is a starvation tax. That is heavy, man. That is a bite and a half. Business Today takes a short break. When we come back, we're still dissecting Finance Bill 2024 and the implications that lie on the country and also we Kenyans on an individual basis. Stay tuned.